Hey guys, and welcome to this snapshot of Bastion. Bastion is the game we're looking at today by Supergiant Games. This is really something special, guys. I did this recently with another video with Limbo. Normally in these snapshot videos I look at a game and kind of follow my first time experiencing it. It's supposed to be kind of a first impressions type thing. But with this game, I've beaten it already. It came out a while ago, but it's just so good. It's so good that I had to show it to you guys and tell you what I like about it, because I really like this game. So we can just start out here by looking at the options. Controls are fully mappable, which is great. You can even have a gamepad if you want. The settings are fairly simple. You can change the resolution and the brightness, and that's about it. I mean, there's not a whole lot of graphical options there. It's just those two things pretty much. And so there's also a new game plus, which I'll add that this game does have a lot of replayability to it, especially with that option. You kind of carry over your progress with your weapons and tonics and things like that, and you can bring them into a new game with you. So there's a lot of replayability there. But we're going to start a fresh new game. Let's just take a look at this.
Proper story is supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky. He gets up, sets off for the Bastion, where everyone agreed to go in case of trouble. Ground forms up under his feet as it pointing the way. He don't stop to wonder why. Finds his lifelong friend just lying in the road. Well, it's a touching reunion.
So as you can see, the controls are very simple. WASD to move around, left click to attack with your primary weapon down here. Later you get a secondary weapon, actually very soon, and then eventually you get a special attack. Aside from those three controls, there's one other control, which is to drink a health potion. And of course you can push space to kind of do this combat roll. Aside from that, that's all the controls really are. The controls are very simple. It is kind of a hacky slashy type game. You're mostly just hitting enemies and killing them, and as you can see, the game world is very vibrant, great color to it. It's got animations really good, very fluid, and you know, I mean, the graphics aren't that special, but the aesthetics are. You know, there's a big difference between graphics and aesthetics. This is a very visually pleasing game, even though it doesn't have a lot of, like, you know, shadows and bump mapping and you know, all that sort of bells and whistles. It doesn't got all that. You know, it doesn't ask for that. And so for what it is, it's absolutely visually, it's great. I gotta point out to you guys, the soundtrack for this game is unbelievable. It is without a doubt my favorite soundtrack of a game I've ever seen, ever heard. Honestly, it really is. I'm not exaggerating. You can actually get the game bundled with the soundtrack of the game. Do that. If you're gonna get this game, get it with the soundtrack, because if you like soundtracks at all, if you like listening to that sort of a thing, it is so good. There are so many pieces that are just so well done. It's one of the best soundtracks I've ever seen.
He sees what's left of the rippling walls, years of work undone in an instant, in the calamity.
There we go.
That a survivor? No, ma'am. It's a gas fella, forced out from underground.
Combat kind of works like this.
Pops him good.
Just kind of hit things until they die.
A piece of him though.
Just fine. That's kind of what the game calls for. If I did have any complaint about this game whatsoever, which is not really a complaint to be honest, is the action is very simple. It's very kind of click until something's dead, roll out of the way, and that's about it. There's not a whole lot going on into the combat. You do get a shield later, which you can hold up with the shift key, and depending on your timing with that, you can deflect projectiles back at enemies, and of course you get your special move and a secondary weapon, and depending on how you mix it up with weapons, you can really vary the way you can approach combat, but it's still very hack and slashy. It's just kill waves and waves upon enemies sort of a thing. That's kind of
an old repeater falls out of the sky.
Oh, for instance, here's the second weapon.
Gods, but it'll have to do.
And the different weapons are very varied. Like, there are a lot of very different weapons. They're all very unique. There's nothing that's too similar to one another. The two most similar weapons in the game would have to be the dual pistols you get, and then the repeater, which is this gun.
Kid just rages for a while.
There's also some similarities between the rifle that you get later on and the breaker bow.
Kid's
but
worked up quite a thirst by now, so that fountain looks real inviting. Sometimes you just need a drink.
But honestly, I mean, I don't have any problem with the way the combat is. I think it's great for the type of game this is.
Here from the mines.
You can lock onto people by holding down the shift key, which is very helpful.
Kid finds a memento from a girl he knew. Always used to fancy her.
Now the game does have some form of RPG elements in the fact that you can upgrade weapons, and there are specific stages in which you can train.
It's a wonder the old saloon's still standing. Used to have the nicest view.
You can train with certain weapons, and by completing certain challenges, you can unlock additional upgrades for them, and you can also find things to upgrade your weapons throughout the world. Depending on, you can focus on different weapons, and depending on how much time you put into leveling up your weapons, you're looking at somewhere between 6 to 9 hours to complete the game. I mean, it's not a super long game, but for an indie game, 6 to 9 hours is not bad. It's pretty good.
He sets foot inside one of Celandia's famous watering holes. Inside's old Rondi, the bartender. The calamity got him before his drinking did. Rondi always wanted his ashes scattered here. Then Kid finds his trusty shield.
Here's the shield I was talking about earlier.
But just as he's getting a handle on it, the security takes him for a petty thief.
And as I said, if you
Clang.
Bam.
Shield saves his hide.
If you guard right at the right moment, you can actually deflect projectiles back at enemies.
Windbags start turning up for last call.
There are several different difficulty settings you can put the game on, which can make the game very challenging. Overall, the game's not a very challenging game. It's just
more squirts start coming out of the woodwork.
It's just not that challenging of a game, which is okay.
A big old fella pops out in front of the kid.
Oh, snap. And if you do die, there are checkpoints that are, given out, quite a bit. There's lots of checkpoints, so you never lose too much.
Kid sees the way to the Bastion out the window.
It's not a very frustrating game to play. It's very forgiving. For instance, you can even roll off the edge of the world, and you just kind of lose a very small amount of health. That's partially because of how easy it is to fall off the world. Kind of get a look of the difference between certain weapons. This is much more powerful than the repeater, but you have to hold it down for a while first. As I said,
then he falls to his death. I'm just fooling.
And let me point out the narrator here, okay? This is the thing that really makes Bastion special, is the way that the story is presented. This game does have a story, and it's a fairly interesting one, to be honest. It's does have some twists and turns in it, some that you don't see, and at the end of the game there is actually a couple big choices you can make that affect the way the game ends. That's another reason to play through the game again. So this game does have a lot of replayability. You can replay it with different weapons, a different ending choice, different difficulty. You can complete certain challenges, certain challenge levels. So this game has a lot of replayability to it. There's a lot to do in this game for the price that it is, and the fact that it's an indie game, especially with the already pretty generous, 6 to 9 hour story. And the reason that's
a good perch for some target practice.
The reason I give it such a large margin of difference there is because it really depends on how much you spend in the training fields for the different weapons. That'll really determine how much time the game actually takes.
Once the fastest man in the land.
But like I was talking about, the narrator is just the way that the story is presented through the narrator is like playing a book. It's the best way I can think to describe it. It is so interesting how they do it, where you're playing through the game, you don't even realize you're learning things about the world, and you don't even think you realize you're learning things about your character and other people and kind of what's going on, but you are, after a few hours of gameplay, not even that, you suddenly realize that you know so much about the world and what's going on, and you actually care about what's happening. But there's been no cutscenes, there's been no conversations between characters, really. All you've really had is this narrator constantly kind of informing you about the world as you kind of encounter it, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I think that's one of the best things to happen to gaming in a long time, and it's one of the reasons.
The emergency defenses still work. Bad news is they're aiming for the kid.
One of the best things about this game is that fact. I think that
right back at you.
I really do think that more games should kind of adopt this model.
The kid could loose an arrow, strong and true.
Because it was just, this game proves that it can be done, and it can be done well. I mean, it really is cool, man. It just feels cool to play it because of that narrator. And that guy's voice is excellent. He's got a cool voice. He's a perfect narrator. Now, I don't really want to go much further in this game. I'm going to keep this video kind of short because this game is so excellent. I want you guys to play it for yourselves, alright? You've kind of given a very brief taste of what kind of is to come. But this game is excellent. It really is. It gets my biggest stamp of approval I can possibly give to an indie game. This is one of my favorite games of the year. All right, it's up there with The Witcher 2 and Skyrim and those games. It really honestly is, and it's this little indie game, and you gotta pick it up. Pick up the soundtrack. The graphics are great. The gameplay is really fun. The story is interesting, and the music. I can't talk enough about the music. The music is just so damn good. Play the game. You'll be doing yourself a disservice if you do not pick up this game and play it. Supergiant Games really hit the ball out of the park with this one, and I'm really looking forward to what they do in the future, if it's anything like this. Perhaps even a Bastion 2. The end of the game does kind of leave up an opening to where that could be a possibility. But like I said, I'm going to end this video here. This was a snapshot of Bastion, and I will see you guys next time.